Hello, I'm James Morrow, and I've got some great news. It's suddenly cool to protest lockdowns. Only you can only do it in China, and certainly not in some place like Australia or the United States, where you will be called a cooker or a knuckle-dragging, bleach-guzzling, horse-deworming Trumpian lunatic for your efforts. What am I talking about, and why the difference? Let's find out as we go, busting the narrative. Now, it's no secret that right now China is being rocked by anti-lockdown and, in fact, anti-Chinese Communist Party protests as a result of the Xi Jinping regime's fanatical COVID-0 policies that have made what was already a prison state even more unpleasant. Have a look at this.
动手抓谁？操你妈！他们怎么打老百姓都行，鸡巴老百姓他妈反抗就鸡巴带走。
Dramatic stuff, and made all the more powerful by the fact that many have been triggered by a deadly fire in Urumqi, where at least 10 people died in a burning apartment block. Their rescue impeded, apparently by Chinese authorities who had locked the residents of the building in their home for their own protection from the deadly COVID coronavirus, of course. Now, the Chinese government is urgently trying to figure out how to defuse the protests, which are bigger than what happened at Tiananmen Square and which also appear to have taken on a life of their own. But what's fascinating to me is not just the protests. I mean, yes, it is not every day that you see a massive uprising against the totalitarian Chinese regime. But what is also fascinating is how they are being covered. Because all of a sudden, lockdown protests are fashionable. Here's the Sydney Morning Herald saying China is running out of options as its COVID hole gets deeper. Here's the New York Times. At a China COVID protest, a mix of giddy elation and anxiety. And here's the Australian ABC. They've called it a movement, which is progressive speak generally for we approve of what these people are doing. Yet, the really funny thing is, think back just, months or a year or so ago, how these same media outlets treated other lockdown protests when they happened in the West. The same Sydney Morning Herald that seemed to cheer the Chinese lockdown protests also sneered at the ones which took place in Sydney and Melbourne a year ago and talked about the price of freedom. Well, who needs that stuff? The New York Times bemoaned dangerous lockdown protests, but then would later do an about-face and say the George Floyd protests and riots were perfectly okay because, hey, social justice, right? And not to be outdone, far-left American TV network MSNBC, at the start of the pandemic, looked to China's lockdowns as guidance for the U.S. So what has changed? Well, on one level, it's wonderful to see so many of the media being so positive about anything pro-freedom, especially in China, which the left has far too often played footsie with. But it is also true that there are more than pockets of COVID-0 insanity still out there. Just check out the Washington Post's Taylor Lawrence, who defended China's zero COVID policies while saying the U.S. killed millions by, God forbid, opening up. She said, there is no lasting immunity to COVID in a lengthy Twitter thread. She went on and said, you can get COVID over and over and over again because there are so many endlessly evolving strains and antibodies wane. And she said, choosing not to kill off millions of vulnerable people, as the U.S. is doing, isn't a critical flaw to what China is doing, she said. Crazy stuff, and it's an example of the extreme rhetoric that some sections of the media still cling to. And it's a reminder that even if some sanity is poking through in some quarters, it's still only like a sunny day during La Nina. Thanks for watching. I am James Morrow, and to support this channel, please like, share, and subscribe below, and I'll see you next time for more Busting the Narrative. Bye-bye.